Okay guys, Joe here, GTV6 guy. So tonight I'm going to show you how to reinstall a crankshaft and swap out your main bearings. So I finally received from England today. These are my new main bearings, and I also got the new crank bearings. But tonight we're just going to drop the crank in, torque it down, check it. Now here is the old bearing. This is the new. Now, the way you can tell which bearings you'll need is if you look on your crankshaft, you'll have either, I think it's red paint or blue paint on the crankshaft. Mine is red, which means it was standard bearings. They weren't undersized, oversized, whatnot. They fell within a specific measurement when the factory put that engine together. So the standard bearings are what I ordered. Now, what you're going to want to do is when you get your new bearings, get yourself your micrometer, whether it's digital or analog, measure your old bearing, measure your new bearing. They should be within a couple thou of one another. These check out. I've checked all all 8 of the main crankshaft bearings, and they all check out. They're all within spec. So now I'm going to show you how to basically swap these out, drop in your crankshaft, and check everything out, and we'll go from there. So let's get to it. So the way these come out are really the same way they go in. So when you're looking at this, if you're looking down at the journals, there's a little notch right there. So you can't screw up which direction these go in. So when you remove them, all you've got to do is just press down where the notch is, and just press down on that edge, and this will kind of rotate around. Then all you got to do is just get your fingernail under there and just lift it, and it'll lift right up and out. So we'll set this aside over here. We don't need it. So what you'll want to do is, it's handy if you have one of these little oiling tools. You can pick these up at Harbor Freight for like $5. So what you want to do, just get in there, get a little bit of oil on the journal itself, and then get a little bit of oil on the surface of the bearings. And then all you're going to do is you're just going to basically line up that little notch, again, this little notch here, line it up with where it needs a seat, and just basically all you're going to do is just press this in, and it will just kind of fall into place. And it'll just slide right in, especially if you have enough oil in there. It'll all just drop into place, and it's really easy to do that. So I've already done the other 3. So before you go any further than this, make sure you install your thrust washers. So these basically are keeping the crankshaft. These are going to control the crankshaft being able to move backwards and forwards, because there needs to be a little slop for oil to get on this main bearing. So you want to make sure you reinstall these. Again, there's little grooves. So the grooves face out. So don't lose these. You can replace them. These spec'd out. These were barely worn, so I'm just reusing them. You can replace them. They're, I believe, about 30 bucks a set. So they're not going to break the bank, but these were little to no wear. So we'll just reuse them. And they just drop in where this rear main bearing goes. So we just drop those in, oil them, and the oil will help it all stick together. So there you go. So that's that. And then, like I said, you just want to get a little bit of oil on all the surfaces. Not too much, just a little bit. And then just go in with your finger and lightly coat the surfaces of all the bearings. Just like that. Cool. All good there. So now we're going to bring over the crankshaft, and we're going to drop it in. I'm looking at the camera and I'm out of focus. Why is it out of focus? Come on. You can do it. There you go. All right. Okay. Let's bring the crank over, drop it in. So you want to make sure, because this thing does weigh about 45, 50 pounds, when you drop it in, make sure you're lining up your bearings and your journals and go straight down, and try not to ricochet it and bounce it around off of everything. And the back one will be the most tricky because that's where your the thrust washers are. And it should all just drop in like that. So once you're sure this is nice and seated, if all is well and right in the world, this should easily spin. So just grab a hold of the front and give it a spin. Look at that. So that is a good sign. I don't feel any hang-ups. I don't feel it dragging. I don't feel anything that feels like it's scratching or dragging or anything like that. So that's a good sign. You can look down, look at the crank, look at how the oil's distributing, make sure it's distributing evenly. So that is our first good sign. So that's great. So the crank is now back in the engine. So what you're going to want to do now is install those caps on your mains. So here you got your mains. So you're going to do the same thing. You're just going to drop the new bearing halves into here, and then we're going to drop these in place. You can go forward to back, backwards to front. Now remember, the back is going to have your cigarette seals, which are going to be installed here and here. Let me get this to focus again. Come on, you can do it, camera. Work with me. You can do it. There we go. But for the sake of this right now, all we're going to do is install the caps and torque them down. Because all we're checking for is to make sure the crank moves freely. It's not hung up. It's not pinching. Make sure the bearings are not oversized, because if anything's going to go wrong, you want to find out before you put the engine all back together. So let's put these bearings in and drop these caps into place. So I'm going to bring these guys over. And these as well. Okay. So here's all the new bearings. 4 on the bottom, 4 on top. And it does not matter when they're brand new what is front and what goes in the rear. So, and then like I said, again, just oil the surface here. Spread that around a little bit. Do the same. And again, it's the same thing. So just like down on the block, on the crank, or on these main caps, you've got this notch that meets up with this notch right there. So all you want to do, and this is just the same as on the block as it is on the cap here, you're just going to line that up like that, and then just press, and that's it. That's all there is to that. It is crazy simple. So then all you want to do, a little bit of oil. It could be a lot, it could be a little, doesn't really matter. You don't want to go crazy, of course, but, and then going to drop this into place. So this is the forward cap. So we're going to drop that on, okay? And just repeat from back to front, front to back. It doesn't really matter. And again, just line up the little notch and press down into place. And that is all there is to that. Same thing, lightly, just a light coating of oil. Or if you don't want to do it on the bearing itself, you could do it down here on the actual crankshaft journal itself. So we'll drop this one into place. And you want to make sure they fully seat down. There's a little groove that they sit down and they'll fully seat in. You just want to make sure that happens so you don't torque them down crooked and cause yourself any kind of problems, because that would just be all bad. Now, I'm going a little fast, and I want to tell you guys, definitely take your time if this is your first time attempting this. This is only the second engine in my life I've ever been into this far. The first was a 350 small block Chevy that I rebuilt or attempted to rebuild when I was 15 in high school. And that was in my very first car, which was a 1969 Chevrolet El Camino. And that had a 305 in it originally, 305 V8 that I swapped, or the plan was to build a really high output, real high output 350 V8. But so I bought a 350 and built it myself to swap in. And so that's where I cut my teeth in kind of having the know-how as to what the hell I'm doing with this kind of stuff. And realistically, whether it's an aluminum V6 like this out of an Alfa or a old cast iron steel Chevy V8, there's not a lot different as far as how they work, how they're put together. Obviously, the materials are different, aluminum versus steel, things like that. But really, the internal parts, they're not that different. So, I mean, if you've cut your teeth at all in your past on any kind of engine, whether it be a little 4-cylinder out of a Honda, a big V8 out of an American car, or any kind of European 6 or 4-cylinder, you're not really reinventing any wheels, working on one or the other. Okay, so these are, there we go, all dropped into place. So again, now that this is just very, very lightly on there, but again, you want to give it a spin. Make sure, okay, still spins. That's still a good sign. So that's good. Okay, so now what you're going to do is we're going to take all of our nuts and we're going to torque these caps down. Now let me grab my grab a rag, and then I will grab some tools, and then we'll do this real fast. And I'm trying to go kind of fast because I don't want this video to drag out too long. But I'm trying to go slow enough as well so you guys kind of see what I'm doing. So we are going to torque these down. We've got our handy dandy Alfa Romeo workshop manual. So we are doing our right there. Nuts securing the main bearing caps to crankcase. Oiled. So these are oiled, which we've oiled them. So we've got units of measure, we've got Newton meters, kilograms, and foot-pounds. Of course, foot-pounds makes most sense to me because I'm American. So we are going to go between 56.05 and 57.5 foot-pounds. So that's what we'll be aiming for. So we'll just split the difference and call it 57 foot-pounds. So that's what we'll shoot for. 57 is the number. So let's quickly get these down. And if I was better prepared, I would have had all this set up for you guys, but I decided to turn the camera on kind of at the last minute and make this video for you. And if I remember correctly, these are 19 millimeter, if memory serves me. And it looks like I'm right. Okay, so 19 millimeter is what we got. So we're just going to install these quickly, just with my impact. I'm not going to torque them down with this. This is just to get the nuts down, just to get them bottomed out, basically. So you're going to drop your washers on. You're going to have your washer, drop it on, and start your nut by just finger it on. We're just going to do that all the way around, get them started. Now, it's a good idea. You're going to want to oil these nuts and washers. I did not wipe the oil off these when I took this apart. I just left them oiled and sitting in a little, just a little container. If you do happen to take these out and rinse off the oil, just re-oil them. Just if you have a spare coffee can or a little container, Tupperware, steal one from the kitchen. Just soak them in some oil. So we're not going to torque these. I'm just getting them started. So this impact has 3 settings, of course. It's set to 1. So it is not going to torque out and impact on these at all, because that's not what we're trying to do. Just getting them started. So, okay, so these have all been started and wrenched down. And as my camera goes out of focus again, for some reason, come on. All right, so again, here's another good point. Stop, grab a hold of your crank, and give it a spin. So that is still, we got a good sign. We've torqued this down, we've got it started, and it's still spinning. So that means we're not pinching, our caps are on straight, the bearings are seated correctly. And I'll tell you, on that 350 I messed up some brand new bearings, because what happened was that I didn't get the cap seated quite right. And when I torqued everything down, basically one of the halves of the bearings was seated just a little cockeyed, and it pinched the crankshaft. And I didn't check several times along the way. I just cranked it all down and gave it a spin, and I screwed up the bearing real bad. I just tore the bearing up. And I ended up having to lightly get the crankshaft itself machined to take out the scoring from the bearing, and the bearing was done. And I didn't even start the engine. All I did was turn it over by hand a couple times. And I could feel it was dragging, but by the time I had taken it all back apart again, I could see what I had done. Now, if I had taken 5 minutes and done a couple extra steps and checked and rechecked, I'd have saved myself a lot of hassle. But like I said, I was 15, impatient, stupid, etc. So anyway, let's get the torque wrench, and we'll just slowly start torquing these down. And let's see, I think I've said the number we want is 57, if I'm not mistaken. And this falls in again to your double check, triple check. 57 foot-pounds is what we'll go for. So we'll take our torque wrench. Let's see here. We're going to call that, there's 0. 10, 20, 30, 40. I can't see. The lighting in this part of the garage is not the best. What did I say I want? 57. So we're at, let's see. There's 57 on the dot right there. Okay. Okay. So we're at 57. And I need my 1/2-inch drive. 19 mil. Okay. So what you're going to want to do with this is, I believe, it doesn't specify on here. So what I would do is do it kind of like a head. You're going to want to kind of crisscross around so you torque down, what's the word I'm looking for? So you torque down consistently across the surface. So I would say, I'm just going to work from the inside out. So I'm going to go here first, then here, then here, then here, then here. You know, just crisscross around and just go little by little. So I'm just going to go there a little bit tighter. Then I'm going to go here. And I'm not going to go until it torques. I'm just going to go until there's some resistance. Then we'll go out here. And we'll go here. And again, you're just trying to spread the load out gently and evenly. So there. So now before I do my final torquing, I'm going to give the crank another spin. Look at that. We're still good. Let me get this camera to focus. Come on, you can do it, you POS. Okay, so look at that. Still good to go. So now we're going to do our final torque setting. We're going to crank all of these down to the factory torque. And then hopefully, if we've done everything correctly up to this point, it'll still spin. So we're going to go. There we go. There's the first one. There's the second one. Just keep and go back every now and then and just re-verify you're still on your torque setting. I don't know why I have to keep doing this. Usually this will stay focused a lot better than this, but that's okay. You get the gist of what I'm doing. Okay. Run to this guy. Good, good. We'll go over here. Cool. Come up to this front one. Okay, now we'll go back to this back one. Okay, and the last one up here. There we go. Okay, so those have all been set to factory torque settings. Now the moment of truth. Will it spin? So I'm going to do this by hand. So if I can't do this by hand easily, then we've got a problem because you should be able to. So look at that. Beautiful. No hang-ups. And that's it. You just want to kind of look around, inspect, just check everything you can. And listen. You want to listen. See if you can hear the sound of any kind of like metal on metal, any kind of dragging. And it'll stand out. You just use your ears, just be quiet. Listen, feel. Go both directions. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Could not have had that go any smoother. So at this point too, give the crank a little bit of a push forward and backward, because you do not want to have too much, or you actually don't want to have any forward and backward movement. But if your thrust washers are in place and you remember them, you won't have any. If you do have some play, you probably forgot your thrust washers and you're going to have to go back and put them in. But you're going to have to take these caps off again anyway, because I still need to I have to install the cigarette seals and the rear main bearing and stuff like that. But this is purely just to make sure that, number one, my measurements were correct when I took my mic and checked these. And you can see a little bit here, you can see there's some red paint there, there's some red paint there. Red paint there. And what that indicates, now that I have my manual out, let me grab my rag. There it is. And I'll show you what I was talking about when I was talking about red and blue paint. So if you come into the book, and let's see if I can find that page. Here we go. So you have engine assembly. Let me find the camshaft or the crankshaft, because that's what we're working on. Here we go. So here's your crankshaft. Let me get in good and close. Okay, so here's your crankshaft, rear, front. So you have your main journal diameter, which is measurement A, which is your main journal diameter. Then you have measurement B. So they're talking here about red and blue. So your crank will have either red paint or blue paint from the factory. Red paint indicating the certain measurements of these bearings. which will then indicate which bearings you will need when you do this job, if you decide to do this job. So hopefully over the 30 or 35 years, the paint has not been worn away or washed off because of all the oil. In this case, mine has not. So I'm guessing you'll probably be lucky and it'll be there as well. So you just want to look for either red or blue paint. And that will indicate to you which crank bearings you're going to need, as well as what connecting rod bearings you'll need. In this case, red indicates standard bearings. Now, when you go to order, and just because I've gone through this, indicate whether you have red or blue paint. Now, I'll tell you right now, I checked around in the United States. Nobody currently has both sets of both the connecting rod and the crankshaft bearings in stock together. I actually had to get these out of England. So, the cost is the cost. It is what it is. You have to pay a little extra for shipping, but the cost of the parts themselves are pretty similar in pricing. Whether you're paying in American dollars or pounds, they're pretty similar. So, when you are going to do this, indicate red or blue, and that'll just indicate which bearing sets you need. Now, when I say bearing sets, you're going to talk about standard, then you're going to have 0.010 over or 0.020 over. That would indicate an engine that's had some work done, or the factory machined it a little bit more than the other. But a lot of the times that would indicate that in most cases, that means that engine has been rebuilt at some point, and the bearings have to be oversized because they've taken some material off these crankshaft bearings. So, but in this case, I had red on my crank, which indicated that I had standard. But you want to double check, because just because it says that I have standard bearings doesn't mean that this engine at some point wasn't taken out, somebody gone through it and put in different bearings. In this case, everything checked out. So that's why it's important, before you start installing all that, is mic it all out. Make sure the measurements are pretty dang close to each other, within a couple thousandth of an inch. And that'll tell you right away that you're good to go. So there you go. So now we've checked this out. We've installed the crank. We've torqued down the main caps. We've checked it all. Now you could go a step further with this. And a lot of people would recommend it. I would recommend it as well. And I might even go this far, because I am going to pull the caps off anyway, is get some Plastigauge. And if you don't know what Plastigauge is, it's kind of it almost looks like a piece of plastic horsehair. And you lay it down across the bearing, you put your cap on, you torque it down to factory spec, and then it'll kind of mush out. And then what you do is you remove the cap again, and then you basically, on the little package, it'll have measurements. And then you can measure the thickness of the squished Plastigauge, and that'll tell you how many thousandths of an inch clearance you're going to have between the bearing and the surface of the crankshaft or the connecting rod, whatever it may be. Now, I would recommend going that step. I probably will. I don't have any here tonight as I make this video, but like I said, I wanted to make sure first and foremost that the bearings were correct. As far as I could tell, all the indicators check out, the measurements, miking them, all those things check out. It's spun at every point, and it still spins freely by hand, which is good. But just to be safe, before you go through all the trouble to put it all back together, put it back in the car, hook up everything back in the car. So before you do another 12 to 16 hours worth of work to reinstall this in the car, take the 5 minutes to do a Plastigauge test, which I'll probably do tomorrow. But for the purpose of tonight, I just wanted to check these bearings, check my clearances, make sure basically, yeah, I'm probably good to go. But because I've got months until my heads arrive, I've got nothing really better to do except clean up the engine bay and things like that. But I will probably pull the Plastigauge. I'll probably get some, pull it, put it on here and check it. But just for now, I wanted to make sure that my bearings that I ordered are probably correct and I don't need to reorder. And from the looks of it, they are correct and I don't need to reorder. But I will Plastigauge just to be 100% certain. You should too. Do it right. Do it right the first time. Measure, you know, they always say measure twice, cut once. When it comes to this kind of stuff, measure 10 times and do it once. So that's all for now. I did this as quick as I could, but I didn't want to go too fast and skip over some things. And the point is, I just want to show you guys that this isn't really rocket science. It's actually all very easy.